People say like, well, you sound like a socialist to me. But let me explain to you why.
Exactly.
Yes.
You sound like a socialist now.
See, I can get along better with a socialist libertarian than I can with a white woke.
Talk to more libertarian socialists. I feel like that's...
I think we're so close, but Fauci, Bernie, Biden, Elizabeth Warren, these are career politicians and they don't care about you. Well, in college, when they described anarcho-syndicate socialism, and that's where you go, right? You go to
Chomsky,
Catalina, right? And you get to them.
Catalonia. I was actually just reading Homage to Catalonia by Orwell. You should read it if you haven't.
I have.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, and I always find it very interesting. Was it Catalonia existed? Was it from? It was only about 4 years before they were taken over by the Soviets.
Yeah, but
I mean, they just got raped by the Soviets.
Yeah, and
so I wouldn't say a very good example.
I mean, yeah, Franco did.
Not so much the fascists. The Soviets were the real problems for the Catalonians.
I mean...
But okay, go ahead and explain to me.
Right, yeah, okay.
I appreciate this. I appreciate
it sucks that people like Crowder get to win arguments now because of how far left you fucking morons have moved. And now you guys are unironically taking up like these completely indefensible positions. They lasted for 4 years, dog, okay? These guys were a country for less time than Trump was a single-term president. Why is this your go-to? What about the Rojava in Syria? You mean like the people that have existed for like 7 years and like war-torn Syria and one of the most unstable places on earth? Like, come on, dude.
I also appreciate I think this is a good time where we can have a dialogue like this, even though I wildly will disagree with you. I'll let you know
That's the thing,
but
right?
No one accuse the other person of racism, sexism, homophobia. It's like, look, you believe in...
Isn't libertarian socialist a Vosh label? Technically, socialism doesn't really make many statements on like the state of the government. So like you can be like a libertarian socialist. If anything, somebody could tell me or explain this. I think a libertarian socialist would just be a communist. I don't know what the difference between the two would be. Because like communist implies no government, libertarian implies no government. I think libertarian does. Like socialist implies worker owns means of productions. So like, I don't know, like if you have a libertarian socialist, I don't know what the difference between that is and a communist. I don't know what the difference is other than maybe it sounds better. Communist implies heavy government. What? No, so communist by definition is no government. Generally, but you know what? Colloquially, people use these words to all mean whatever the fuck they want anyway, but technically communism implies no government, like absolutely no government. Historically speaking, the way that people have tried to make communism is with like a very authoritarian government because they feel like in order to get there, you need like a single powerful authoritarian party to guide your country into it. So people will say like, oh, well, communism means like heavy government. And like that's been some people's theories.
But I'm also not like an identity politics kind of leftist.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you have no home right now. Politically, you're homeless.
There's a home.
Okay, but then the hardcore left did this. Don't run away from identity politics. People's identities are really important. Getting rid of our intersectional lens for looking at things is so cringe. Identity is important to everybody. Don't do this shit where you're like so scared of owning. You're like, oh, I'm not into identity politics. Like, what do you mean? Why not? Like, all sorts of identities are so important to like our political decisions and how we function in society. Like, just own it. It's okay. It's okay to be like, but just because you're heavily into like identity politics doesn't mean you've got to say cringe shit like all white people are evil.
The way I see libertarian socialism is I see it as democratization of the economic sphere, right? Mm-hmm. So we've had democratization of the political sphere, right? We had that with like the Enlightenment, which led to liberalism, liberal democracies. That's what we have today. Workers controlling their pursuits in their work, controlling their workplaces, having a say in decisions within their corporations, in the places they work, instead of a very rigid, hierarchical, top-down system where you have a board, you have the C-suite, commanding orders from the top down. Mm-hmm. If you work at a place like, say, Amazon, you should have an equal say in the operations of that company as Jeff Bezos does, and you all work for this entity.
Well, what about the liberty of the individual who invested all of that money and risk and resources into creating the company only to not be able to reap the rewards, right?
His workers are the people that provide the labor. The fruits of Amazon are because of his workers.
I would disagree.
Really?
He started Amazon.
He did.
There are no workers
Amazon
without them. Do you really believe that the labor of, for example, putting a postage stamp is the same as someone who invested millions, potentially billions of dollars, lost it in their own savings, right? Invested in a company, built it from the ground up. Do you really think that they should be compensated the same?
I'm not saying that there should be equal wage.
Fuck no. I'm just gonna become a socialist for like 2 weeks. The correct answer to this is, yeah, there is going to be some liberty lost by the individual capital owner, that invested his money and doesn't get to solo reap the rewards from it. However, just like you don't have the freedom to drunk drive because your drunk driving is repealing the liberty of other people, you don't have the freedom as a capital owner to just invest a fuck ton of money and have your individual liberty override the liberty of all of your workers. That is sad that in a socialist society or whatever, you wouldn't have, I guess, these individual capital owners that get to take risk and then force everybody else to play by their rules. However, you can't say that there's more liberty when one person using capital is able to control the freedom of so many other people that work in his firms.
I don't think I'm mischaracterizing you in that this is sort of a utopia, which we know will never happen. But what would that look like? Because as a business owner, I would never have started I employ 15 people. And by the way, I pay significantly more than 15 an hour.
What I think.
I would have never started it if I thought that I would have the same amount of say as my 15 employees.
Because that is a lot of sunk cost that you put into starting something, right?
I made no money for half a decade.
I understand that, but the way I think companies should be moving in the future is towards like a worker co-op type of model, right? Mm-hmm. A model where, you know, there's true democracy in the workplace. You have workers discussing, all right, what is our company's operations going to look like?
Do you think you could build out a better argument for socialism than these college students? I can build a better argument for socialism than anybody that argues for the internet, because most people that argue for socialism, first of all, they forget that like a lot of these ideas are rooted in critiques of capitalism, and a lot of them don't understand capitalism well enough to even understand the critiques of capitalism, right? That's why I said before that I've realized now, after having debates with lefties, the cheat code for winning debates against lefties is literally just talking about capital markets, because they don't understand like how the stock market works, which is a pretty important part of critiquing capitalism. But like, yeah, the problem is a lot of people just don't have like a very solid understanding of things having to do with capitalism. So when it comes time to critique it, they don't have like good responses towards what they're saying, or towards like capital defenders like Crowder.
Everyone gets a say in it because everyone is affected by it, right? Like if you are involved in a system and you have no say or no choice in how that system operates.
So, because you just used the example of a system, so if I may, I'd like to go with sort of your allegory there. Do you believe that every person who uses a system of iOS or uses a system of Microsoft, do you believe that they're do you believe that they're just as no, it's not. Do you believe that they're just as qualified in determining how that system should work as the person who created the system?
No, because if you're a consumer of iOS, you're not involved in the facilitation of it. Like you're not.
So let me ask you this, and let me scale it back a little bit. I was using your analogy of the system. Do you believe that people who work on the lower levels at Apple, on the floor, for example, putting together iPhones, or people with whiteboards, do you believe that they should have?
I think I know where your argument's
they're just
going.
as capable.
In your specialization of labor expertise, I totally understand that. I'm not saying totally disregard things like expertise. Like if you have, say, Apple, you have very specialized employees working on a very specialized product that they're selling, right?
So I understand where he's going to take this now, how you can have different employees voting different things. But honest to God, you can bite the bullet on this with a really easy analogy. Like instead, you can just flip the question and say, do you think the average American has a good understanding of like foreign policy or how our medical system functions or how anything in the economy functions? Like if you say the answer to that is probably going to be, well, no, then it's like, okay, so should we stop voting on like who the president is because they pick all of the, or should we stop voting on representatives and senators? Like just because a situation is incredibly complicated, if you're involved in the day-to-day running of that system, like if you're a worker or if you live in a country, does that mean that you no longer get to have a say over it? Like it's up to the, you would say that it's up to the bosses at that point to make it more understandable or digestible to the workers. The same way that you would say it's a politician's job to make citizens understand, what it is they're voting on. Like that's the answer. You don't have to run from this. You just own it and then compare it to like normal democracy. Like you would never use an argument that like, well, normal democracy can't work because it's too complicated. You'd say, okay, well, politicians need to make it more understandable or something. Or not like we're going to get rid of voting, right?
It wouldn't make sense for someone like a janitor working at Apple in order.
Or actually, you could just flip it on capital markets directly, right? So who do you think is going to have a greater understanding of how, iOS works? A worker that actually works in one of the factories, or some random guy on Robinhood that buys 1,000 shares of Apple and now has voting rights for how to run the company? Right? You could just flip it on capital markets, because guess what? Spoiler alert, not only do lefties not understand capital markets, a lot of capitalists don't understand capital markets either. Like,
to be able to like deliberate how something like that.
So then who determines which person's opinion is permissible?
Involved in the process. That's my thing, is like, because it's the same thing
So you mean all the workers?
Workers, yes.
So the workers would vote?
Yes.
Do you
yes.
not think that the janitors would vote for themselves to be specialized engineers?
Well, I mean, I don't think that's exactly how it would work. It's hard to speculate as well how something like that would work with, like Apple. Like
I don't think it would. Really? I don't think there's. I know. I'm just asking you, like, why would you don't think the janitor would say, like, oh yeah, I want to do that job?
I don't think either of these guys have a very strong understanding of capital markets, but like all of the arguments rest in this relationship between like the board of the shareholders, like the board and like the employees, and like you can. There's so many arguments that you can go into to like go back and forth here, but I don't think anybody has any idea how any of this stuff is.
Why would they vote against themselves? My point is, as a business owner, I have people who work for 15 people who work for my business. I am so grateful that not all of them have a say in every decision that's made, because many of them have no idea, and many of them would not want the responsibility of difficult decisions.
I'm not even saying completely disregard expertise when it comes to making decisions that require that expertise and specialization, right?
Okay.
But I feel like...
But how do you enforce this? Let's say the workers vote, okay?
Yeah.
So in a free society, a libertarian society, the workers vote, and the business owner says, no.
Well, I mean, in that theoretical society,
there wouldn't be an owner.
True. Like, all these workers would be equal participants.
So then how do the businesses get created and started?
Like I said, like worker co-ops. Like, I feel like we should eventually move towards a system in which you have worker-owned cooperatives.
So how do you displace the current owners and turn it into co-ops, right? At some point,
Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren actually had.
Oh God, the 20% owner thing.
Okay. Not exactly to the extent that I would envision it, but
the same Elizabeth Warren who went after the GameStop bettors and defended Wall Street.
Here's the thing. I'm not.
I know that you were pissed. You must have been pissed about that, right?
I'm not a fan of Elizabeth Warren. I'll tell you that. But
all right, common ground.
But they both proposed, like, hey, like, we need worker representation on the board, right? On boards of these companies. Like, workers who work on these floors of these companies, workers who are doing a brunt of the amount of work that provides, like, what you love about Amazon is the fact that it's so efficient, is that they get you your shit in one day, right? Like, the fact that they're very efficient in doing what they do, but that comes at the expense of these workers, that comes at the expense of, I mean, like, you know.
So I don't agree with your premise that workers are doing the brunt of it, and I think that anyone and there's
Really?
Look, and here's the thing. Here's what's interesting to me.
Okay,
Can I finish? Can I make a point here?
Yeah.
What's interesting to me is, for example, if you look at the increase in corporate tax rates, okay, supported by Amazon, supported by all the big companies. You look at the lockdowns, supported by all the big companies, right? We've created more, and this is Bernie supported lockdowns, Elizabeth Warren supported lockdowns, Socialist supported lockdowns.
States, we should have national policy based on science. We should have testing going on all over this country so that when we reopen the economy, workers understand that they're working in a safe environment. Instead, you got 50 states going it alone because we don't have that national protocol based on science. But, you know, Trump will blame everybody for everything instead of dealing with the crises that we face. And the crises we face is reopening the economy safely based on science, not 50 states doing it alone. Crisis we face is that Congress has got to act now to address the enormous suffering and unemployment that is currently existing.
They're the party of big business. Let me explain to you why. There are no more. No, let me explain to you why. We have created more billionaires this last year. Do you realize that? Than ever.
No, billionaires have gotten insanely rich.
No, but only this last year. And there have been more middle-sized businesses and small-sized businesses that have been shuttered.
I think it's just genuinely the case. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. And I'm saying this with no data, but just kind of like I don't want to say common sense, but just what I would imagine is that people that are wealthier are probably always going to be in a better position to take advantage of economic turmoil than people that aren't better situated. You're going to have more capital to weather the storm. You're going to have more. You're going to be like more. Diversified in terms of your market. So rather than one market getting hurt bad, you might have like international sales, or you might have like a widespread, like you're going to be in a position where you can acquire more capital. You've got more assets and shit to secure loans and whatnot. You can find investors and everything more easily. Like, I think that anytime there's a widespread economic disaster, you're always going to be in an area where the rich are getting richer just because they're better positioned to take advantage of it. Right. That's an inevitability of the way that our system is currently organized.
Than ever before. Now, guess what? Those mid-sized businesses oppose the higher corporate taxes, oppose the democratic socialism. The only people who support it are Google, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube.
Well,
they support your ideas, but people like me who employ 15 to 50 people are against it.
You say they support my ideas, and yet I want democratization of the workplace. They definitely don't support that.
Well, guess who's going to have the ability to get a waiver just like Obamacare? The big companies. So we'll have to democratize my workplace, but they won't do that at Amazon.
I mean,
do you disagree with me that there are elites who have more influence and lobbyists for Amazon than me with my little YouTube channel?
That's just how this country operates.
Right.
It's like
and
the influence of like effective oligarchs.
And do you see
like big tech companies like Jeff Bezos is in the world.
And it's interesting that we went from the bureaucrat phase to the oligarch phase to invoke sort of Orwell, right? Which is where we are at this point, where almost conservatives now. Here's one thing where I think we can find common ground, because a lot of people say like, well, you sound like a socialist to me. But let me explain to you why. You have 5 companies, the wealthiest people, increase their net worth by $600 billion in 6 months in this pandemic, right?
Insane.
Insane.
Like,
we agree that that's terrible, right?
Yeah.
Do we both agree like that's...
Absolutely.
Now, we probably agree it's morally reprehensible.
Yes.
Same thing that all these billionaires are created when small businesses are suffering. Now, here's where we differ, okay? I think it's reprehensible. Not if they made their money honestly, I couldn't care less. If Amazon made that money,
I think it's impossible.
Well, no, my point is if they made the money because I chose their goods or services voluntarily, I don't have a problem. The reason they made that money is because of Elizabeth Warren's and Bernie Sanders and Biden's and Kamala Harris's, who shut down the economy and determined winners and losers. In other words,
absolutely,
I was precluded from going to a local grocer. I couldn't go to the local coffee shop. In Michigan, I couldn't go to the local nursery, but I could go to Costco and I could order from Amazon.
Here's the thing, I totally agree with everything you just said, but our difference comes with the solution.
Right, I don't believe that more government would make it better. I think more government has made it worse.
I think that government keeping these businesses afloat is not only good, I think they had a moral obligation to do so.
But they didn't keep businesses afloat.
No, exactly, that's
They only gave money to their wealthy donor class. And the worst offender is Bernie and Elizabeth Warren.
Exactly, you have all these big companies. I mean, it reminds me of 2008 in terms of bailouts going to big banks, right?
Right.
Like you have all these major companies who are benefiting from this, and then the middleman, like the small guy, gets cut out, right?
They want to privatize profits and socialize losses, big banks.
Exactly.
Yes.
I'm like a socialist now.
But my issue is, guess what? What if no company is too big to fail? It's a self-solving problem. If you say, we're not giving you money. If you say, well, look, we're not shutting down businesses, guess what? In every single one of those scenarios, more government is not required to fix it. Government created that problem. Government created subprime loans. Government decided to bail out banks.
My view is government is sustaining that problem, and government completely has the power to eradicate that issue. Like when it comes to coronavirus pandemic, right? In terms of businesses failing, like what, half of small businesses are never going to reopen, right?
Yeah, it was something like the last number I saw was 60% of businesses that were open in April would be closed by October.
And like
record profits for Costco.
And a lot
Amazon.
of those closures would be indefinite, right?
Yes.
Like, my problem is the government had the resources and the opportunity to keep them afloat via stimulus checks, via like all the funding that
they actually didn't have enough, though. That's also the issue.
This is like such an easy slam dunker on somebody like Crowder. So I agree, Crowder, like the government didn't do enough to keep these businesses afloat. Why didn't the Republicans, with Donald Trump in office, do something more? Why didn't they?
They don't have enough money.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. They don't. First, so 2 problems. They don't have enough money, and the money didn't go to the people who needed it.
Exactly. That's like
the money went to social.
I mean, like, you can't say when you're the government that you don't have enough money, right? If you're ever going to create excess currency, like, it's going to be during these times. Like, of course you have the money. We have the money to be in Afghanistan for fucking 20 years. We've got the money to, like, help small businesses during a fucking pandemic, okay?
This is where you talk about how you're not an identity politic person.
Yeah.
The money went to things like critical race. There went to a bunch of bullshit earmarked projects. The money, and not to mention the policy, favored giant...
How much money went to critical race theory? Come on. Like, we're on way different scales of money being spent here. The type of money that we needed to bail out the economy was on the scale of not even close to millions, okay? Not really billions, but on the scale of trillions of dollars, right? Biden's coronavirus relief plan was what, around 2 trillion? The infrastructure plan is around 2 trillion. These are on unimaginably larger scales, right? We're not spending fucking billions of dollars or tens of billions or hundreds of billions of dollars on fucking critical race theory, okay?
Corporations.
That had to be such an insignificant amount of money that went to little...
No, you know,
like that,
Joe Biden's
right?
infrastructure bill, let's use his right now. $2 trillion.
$3 trillion.
First of all, the infrastructure bill is not critical race theory, okay? I don't know how you can oppose the infrastructure bill. I don't know how you can do it.
How much of it goes to infrastructure?
Right. I actually don't know. I haven't read the specifics.
Less than 6. 100 million.
Really?
Yeah.
So what's the rest on?
Bullshit. I'm just talking about 35 billion here, 200 billion there. Big part of it is for Green New Deal stuff.
Okay, wait. Okay. I think that one of the questions last night asked me this, and I didn't realize that this is like a tricky meme that Republicans are doing. This idea that the way that people are phrasing this is like with some really fucking weird shit to how they would define infrastructure. The infrastructure plan covers manufacturing and caretaking, the estimated spending on the proposed American Jobs Plan. So for infrastructure at home, we've got $111 billion spent on clean drinking water. So I think specifically what this refers to is getting rid of lead pipes in every single place in the United States. I think Biden wants it. This is supposed to be enough money to get rid of all lead pipes everywhere in the entire U.S. $100 billion to high-speed broadband. They want to increase the rollout of high-speed broadband, especially in rural areas. We've got electrical infrastructure, affordable and sustainable housing. I think some of this has to do with, is this greenifying? Like making some more buildings more energy efficient and everything. Public schools, early learning centers, community college, 137 billion, and then other shit is 28 billion. For transportation infrastructure, we've got, so I think what what people do is they'll take this 115 billion spent on highways, bridges, and roads, and they'll say, there's only 115 billion out of the $2 trillion plan being spent on infrastructure. And they don't include any of this other shit as infrastructure. I think that's what they do. They use just this one number. I don't know why. Like, it's so dishonest because some of the stuff, even the Trump administration considered infrastructure as well. So like money going into airports, money going into like transportation, public transit, passenger and freight rail. Like there's supposed to be money allocated for trains. I think some of it for consumers or for the public and not just like shipping stuff. There's a lot of money that's earmarked in this for a lot of different awesome things. Wait, you just realized this? No, I hadn't heard the meme talking point before until there was a question that was asked last night and I didn't even think about it. I was like, I don't know.
Recent Biden administration proposal for the infrastructure bill, I believe it was tagged at nearly $2 billion.
2 trillion.
Roughly. Oh, I'm sorry, 2 trillion, not 2 billion.
I wish you were 2 billion.
Roughly 5% of that goes to roads and bridges.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
How do you feel about that?
That infrastructure package looks unbelievably amazing to me. I'm a huge fan of it. If that actually passed, I think it would be like unbelievable. There's so much money in that going to like much needed infrastructure projects across the United States. For whatever reason, it seems like we have so much trouble passing these types of big things. I don't know why we send so much money to, like places overseas. We spent a lot of money in Afghanistan. I think it would be awesome if it passes. I hope for the best. Because he's like, oh, what about like the fact that only 5% is earmarked towards infrastructure? And I didn't think about what they meant by that. But now I realize that like it's like a meme talking point. They're like, oh, most of the money's being wasted on dumb shit. That's just not true, right? Like it's just, well, not right. I'm sorry. It's just not true. It's just stupid as fuck.
Not necessarily, not green infrastructure. No, not just infrastructure.
How is that
but
not
proposing certain
infrastructure,
policies. It's a never-ending hole, right? For example, if throwing more money, if the government had money, throwing more money at schools, Washington, D.C. and Detroit would have the best schools in the country. We don't have a money problem. We have a spending problem, and we have a corruption problem with the government, which I think we agree with.
Definitely, yeah, no.
I just don't think that we should put more power in the hands of the corrupt. I think that you're believing that inherently there are some people who are altruistic. But what I'm saying is probably the examples of people you would pick most, Bernie, ended up benefiting, even, I'm not saying he meant to, ended up benefiting Amazon, Costco, Walmart, and then you had Elizabeth Warren come out against the GameStop bettors.
But my problem is Bernie is he's one socialist senator in a sea of what, 535 federal
I know, can you imagine how bad it would be if everyone was Bernie? There would only be Amazon.
Democratic stealing.
That's my point, right? People like me were going, don't shut down my business, and Bernie's like, shut down the business.
I mean, but did he not support more government funds going to middle-sized businesses?
But the point is, business owners are like, just don't shut down my business.
But
you can't fix the problem by giving me $1,600 is not going to employ 15 people.
But I feel like it's a very reasonable fear to have in order for us to be like,
I don't think that it's reasonable to create the worst unemployment, economic devastation.
The real meme is that because of the economic stimulus that we did have, people like Steven Crowder made out so unbelievably fucking well. There has been a huge wealth transfer to middle class workers and like business owners whose business wasn't adversely impacted. So for instance, and even though people still circle jerk these dumb fuck narratives, you can read it all over online, on Reddit, on Facebook, on Twitter, wherever, where you find these software devs, these people working kind of like white collar jobs or whatever, who are like, I got 2 fucking stimulus checks. I don't have to spend any fucking money on gas. I don't have to waste an hour commuting. I'm getting bonus pay from my company for working from home. I'm not spending any money going out to eat or getting a coffee. Like, I'm fucking overloaded in fucking money. Like, there are so many middle class people. Like, if you look at all of the outlays from the average American household, compare that to the amount of income that they made and the stimulus checks on top of that, it was an insane amount of money. Americans saved more money last year than I think they ever have in like fucking US history. And people like Crowder were in prime position to take advantage of this. Crowder's business should not have been adversely affected by the pandemic. On the contrary, if you did online content, your business should have been positively affected because now you've got more consumers, and I'm pretty sure most people had way more viewership. I'm generalizing a bit, but I'm pretty sure that holds true to be relatively speaking. Not only that, so not only is your general business unaffected, you got stimulus in the form of individuals, but you also got stimulus as a business owner where you could apply for PPE loans. So not only was your business unaffected largely, if you worked in an industry like Crowder did, you got 2.5 months worth of money of all of your payroll for all of your employees for free. So if Crowder employs 15 people, if he pays them all $60K a year, what is that? 600,000 times 300 plus 300,000 is $900,000 over a year. Wait, okay. So let's say he gives them $60K a year. Let's say that's five. I'm generalizing a lot of numbers here, but let's say it's $60K a year, 15 employees. Because he said we pays way more than 15 now, right? That's $5K a month among 15 employees is how much a month? 75,000 a month. So he should have gotten 75 plus 75 plus 37.5 is 150, 187.5. So he could have gotten through PPE loans like $187,000 for free, like cash money in his pocket for fucking free. He didn't have to show a loss for the first loan. He doesn't have to pay that extra money out. He could just continue to pay his employees as normal, right? Like that's so much extra money that could have just been right into his fucking business for a PPE loan, right? Like, but I know that I wouldn't expect the kid to know all of this.
There's a public health thing, and I mean, we could get into like Fauci and how he's flipped positions on it. I mean,
right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks. I mean, for me as a public health official, obviously, I would like the consideration that everybody wears a mask. If you have a physical covering with one layer, you put another layer on, it just makes common sense.
But that was...
See, I think we would have a lot of common ground. Fauci's kind of a...
I think that the government and their messaging was a little bit messed up with the masks early on because you have to treat Republicans like children, unfortunately, because that's how they're going to act when they have to evaluate any type of argument. I think that... I want to say maybe they should have been more honest with the masks in the beginning. Honest to God, I don't actually know if that's the case, though. Because if they would have said, listen, masks are kind of important, but like we need them for our healthcare workers right now, so you guys need to chill. I think there would have been a run on masks like there was on like fucking toilet paper. I think it would have happened. They're in a rough position. Like I'll acknowledge that. Like our healthcare workers and everything, like in terms of the messaging, it's a rough spot to be in for sure. But I wish you could be more honest with it. Instead of saying that like, oh, the government changed their position all the time because they're fucking liars. It should rather be like they were in a rough spot. They probably could have changed it. Like be more honest with your engagement here. It's not like they're just arbitrarily choosing one thing or another. Like they've got reasons to change their minds on things or reasons to change their messaging on things.
Can we end on that? He's kind of a dick.
He's kind of been touted as like the know-all when it comes to health and pandemics. And
Fauci will never lose power under a socialist government. Do you understand that? People like him never lose power.
I don't think
Fauci
so.
has.
Wait, why? Why do you assume that just because you have a socialist government, you're not fucking voting anymore? What? You can absolutely vote people in and out.
At the government teat forever. He screwed up. If you look at the response to AIDS, and he hasn't seen a patient in 40 years.
That's kind of crazy.
Fauci's job is not to see patients right now. What do you mean?
So my point is, I think we're so close, but Fauci, Bernie, Biden, Elizabeth Warren, these are career politicians, and they don't care about you.
I feel like Bernie has been that one guy that has been speaking up for working people, for poor people.
I think he's been speaking up for
almost every step of the way. It's very like verifiable. Like you can go back to his history. You can go back to literally the 1980s, and he's saying the exact same things he's saying now. That's such a marked change from every other politician in Washington right now. Like,
I agree. He's been consistently wrong, in my opinion. But I do
that's
agree.
Where we disagree.
No, but here's the thing. I think he's
consistent.
genuine.
He's definitely.
I don't
genuine.
think he's genuine as far as like. I don't think he's genuine as far as like. He's personally very not generous. If you look at the way he tips and his charitable contributions. So I'm always leery of someone who wants to spend so much.
Okay, firstly, fuck charitable contributions. Also, wait, what do you mean the way that he tips? Is Bernie Sanders a bad tipper? Is that true?
But if you look at his proposed policies and what he has supported through this pandemic, it has his types of policies. Let's say everyone voted in the House, right? I'm just a bill, House, Senate, 100% agreed on the policies that Bernie supported. You would only be left with the trillionaire class. And then afterwards, you would say tax them more. But the point is, at that point, the damage is done.
I don't know.
Shutting down businesses, get rid of the GameStop bettors, right? It's just, to me, I go, okay, I think his heart may be in the right place, but pragmatically speaking, it always ends up destroying people.
I don't know. I feel like he just definitely has been speaking for common people.
I understand what you're saying, but here's the point, right? It's
like
the guy's palming it.
Do you
understand what that term
like
means, right? With magicians, when they're palming something, look, he's going, hey, we're gonna put employees on corporate boards.
Okay.
Meanwhile, you know what creates more of a disparity of power? Shutting down middle-sized businesses and small businesses.
But then you have to
crippling them with taxes.
Then you have to
that creates a disparity, and then you say we're gonna fix it by putting people on corporate boards. How about you create an economy?
Then you have to answer why the billionaire class hates him. Why they're so.
They don't. Amazon supports the increase in corporate taxes.
I'll give you maybe the most perfect illustration of this. During the Democratic primary, you had, after he won Nevada, this was before South Carolina.
Well, hold on a second. Let's use national elections. Primaries are different because primaries they're betting on who's going to win the primary.
It's important. It just goes to show like the views of the billionaire class, right?
Yeah, who overwhelmingly supported Democrats, not Republicans. No, it's not even close.
Okay, fair enough.
It's not even close.
But I feel like they do that for optics reasons. There's definitely an incentive for them to
seem woke.
Exactly.
All right.
That's why I'm not into the whole identity politics.
Or I would also argue the reason they do it is because
God, all the lefties that got so bought into the fucking populist talking shit, like, oh no, I'm not woke, it's not me, I'm not woke, and then like, dude, God, it's so cringe. I'm like, I don't do identity politics. But the reason why is because like 95% of you are fucking white, so you want to get as far away from anything related to identity politics as possible. Fuck black people. Why would you want to talk about any of that shit when you can just talk about cool shit like class and Marx, even though you've never read any?
These giant corporations know they can incur a 30% corporate tax and they can incur all kinds of red tape legislation and come out unscathed, whereas small businesses can't.
I mean, definitely. What you had after Nevada, before South Carolina, you had establishment Democrats who were panicking. All of the ones that were backed by billionaires,
yes.
All of the ones that were backed by moneyed interests, they were panicking because
and
Bernie
the Democrats
seemed
themselves.
like he was going to win. So what happened? You had Pete Buttigieg drop out of the race, right? You had Amy Klobuchar drop out of the race, right? And in return, I mean, like Pete is now head of the Department of Transportation. Like these are like
I agree with you on that.
They coalesced against him in that moment because moneyed interests see him as a threat.
Well, can I ask you something? When you say they coalesced, I want to make sure we agree. You mean corporate donors and the other Democrats, right?
Yes, that's exactly what I mean.
Exactly what I mean. And my point is, apply that to a national level. Corporate donors still coalesce with other Democrats, and that's my concern. What they did to Bernie, they'll do to us.
But my whole point is the fact that they're so fearful of coalescing around someone like Bernie because he poses such a direct threat to their interests.
I think what poses a direct.
Which is why I think he's genuinely a man of like working common class people. Like, and
he's never worked though.
Oh, he was a carpenter. Like he's
never had full-time gainful employment. No, not since college.
Definitely.
No, he hasn't. This guy has not in 40 years. But let me tell you this. And I understand where you're coming from, but let me say this.
I mean,
I agree with you, but there's a slight difference, though. Let me tell you where there's a slight difference. The difference is, I do think you were right that they were afraid of Bernie becoming the nominee. Now, the reason why is because they knew that when you looked at those polls, Bernie was imminently beatable, and they wanted to have a Democrat in power.
I feel like that's definitely a point. They definitely thought that he would be a loser candidate.
Right. And they want to make sure that their Democratic bidders do it for them.
For sure.
So it's not that they oppose Bernie, it's that they want to. But the point is, after a national election, then we have to go primaries, and we have to go to the national election. Overwhelmingly. Why do you think Amazon and Google and Facebook, why do you think all of the biggest companies overwhelmingly support Democrats and seemingly anti-corporate policies?
I mean, in terms of optics, I mean, the country is sort of moving towards, I feel like we're in a sort of anti-corporatist, I guess you could say, populist
Why do you think big
mode.
banks back Democrats?
I mean, I don't know. They back both. Like, it's not even solely a Democrat.
Is that even true? I don't know if that's true or not. Like, didn't Elizabeth Warren write like the Consumer Finance Protection Program or something? Like, isn't that like a really big piece of legislation she keyed that was pretty important in terms of changing a lot of standards of banks and practices? Didn't she get rid of like things like related to like how you process overdraft fees and stuff? But
they've been
Republican
consistently
thing.
backing
But
Democrats.
it's definitely part of like an optics thing in terms of identity politics. Like like I remember there's a Wells
I think
Fargo.
there's a component of that. I also
Like,
think that
yeah.
they stand to benefit financially off the backs of us.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know, like I remember a Wells Fargo ad about recognizing the LGBT community, and I'm like, all right, you don't give a about the LGBT community. Like you're saying,
Sort of like someone walk in
you're
and be
saying-
like, "You suck dick. You can't open a checking account." No. I'm sorry. That doesn't offend you, does
No,
it?
it
Like
doesn't.
that's not even anti-gay. It's
That's
just a
fine.
joke.
No.
See, I can get along better with a socialist libertarian
Talk to
than I
more
can with a
libertarian-
white woke
talk,
bitch.
Talk to more libertarian socialists. I feel like that's.
Let me ask you this
that's
though,
the thing.
as a black guy, okay? Is there anything more annoying than white woke feminists who speak for you?
I mean,
We've been
like,
through a few of them today. They're like, well, I think black
Have you
people.
really? I haven't seen it.
And they're like talking, and I'm like, black people don't feel that way.
Yeah, I mean, I do hate white people speaking on my behalf, for sure.
It's
'Cause,
annoying.
like, the black community is seen as a monolith by both Republicans and Democrats, which is a problem to me. Like, we are expected to have a uniform
horseshoe.
view of seeing the world.
I can see it clearly now.
If you actually talk to
And by, I
any-
would say by black people too sometimes,
I
unfortunately.
mean, yeah, it's been.
Let me say one thing that I feel really empathetic, and we do have to go.
Okay.
But I will say this one thing, and he, quarter black, Garrett's my producer. It's funny, we didn't realize he was black for like, his dad is really black.
Which one is he?
Him, he's black. His dad is like biracial, but looks black, but then he just looks totally
It
white.
does look like there's a bit of ethnic
I
looks like he
don't
might be,
think
like,
it works
Mexican.
that way, man.
So we only found out when we asked him,
He's only black if you're a Nazi. I think most people wouldn't, but okay.
like, what does that mean in English and Spanish? He's like, what do you think? He's like, dude, I'm black. We were like, what? This is after 6 months. But what was I saying before this? I totally forgot.
I don't even remember.
Here's one thing I will say, because he's an example too. If you look at a lot of his relatives and his cousins and his dad, they look more black than he does. But one thing that I do look at with young black men today, and I go, oh man, I didn't have to deal with that as a white guy, is, for example, we have fans who watch the show, and like, one example comes to mind, he was like a black kid who was like a metalhead. And he was like, oh yeah, all my black friends say I'm not black.
No, yeah.
It's because you're expecting. I go, as a white person, no one ever tells me like you have to like this. It's like, oh, he likes country. Oh, he likes hip hop. Oh, he likes this kind of food. And that's not pressure exerted from white people, but it is something
It comes
that's
from both spheres, honestly, because, like, yeah.
Because that sucks. I would imagine that's like that's not a systemic oppression, but it is these expectations like of a black kid feeling
It
from
does
other black
suck.
kids that he's not
Yeah,
black
no,
enough.
for sure. And I mean, like, I've experienced that, like, growing up. Like, it happens, but
Fuck.
definitely something that
I never
needs
got
to
that.
change, and I feel like it's constantly reinforced to the point where I don't know if it'll change anytime soon.
Especially with white woke bitches.
I
They keep
mean-
reinforcing it.
I think especially with Republicans, to be honest.
Oh, come on now.
Oh,
No,
he turned it around.
We're leaving it on a
def-
good note.
There's definitely a way Republicans
You really
see black
feel
people.
like I'm
Here's the
pigeonholing
thing.
you more than a white woke feminist? I don't think you believe that.
I mean, certainly your party is more directed against the interests of the average black person than a Democrat. So even if a white woke feminist is spouting her bullshit saying she knows that
you're talking to a person here. You're an anarcho, you're a libertarian socialist,
Yes, yeah.
and I am. You said you're to the left. I'm to the right of Attila the Hun. Okay, I am not a fan of Republicans.
I actually didn't know that.
I like Donald Trump in a lot of ways. There are some Republicans that I like, but I've been pretty pissed off with a lot of Republicans, and they're kowtowing to the tech oligarchy.
How do you square support with Donald Trump for his?
I don't. Okay, well, I keep saying we have to go.
For his support of that system we were both just criticizing.
Well, Donald Trump has resulted in the lowest African American unemployment.
What about the corporate tax
Republican, and
cuts?
there are more black Americans.
20 million Americans lost their job in the pandemic, working and middle class Americans. At the same time, roughly 650 billionaires in America saw their net worth increase by more than $1 trillion in the same exact period. Let me say it again. 650 people increased their wealth by more than $1 trillion during this pandemic. And they're now worth more than $4 trillion. My fellow Americans, trickle down economics has never worked. And it's time to grow the economy from the bottom and the middle out.
Americans who voted for Donald Trump than any other
wasn't
Republican in
it.
recent memory.
You know
Yes,
that wasn't his
it absolutely
policy.
was.
You know it happened
I think
under
freedom
him,
for
but
all is
you know
freedom
that-
best. Is best for all.
Here's the thing. As a libertarian socialist, I agree. I believe in freedom, but
Here's one thing I think we can both agree on. free speech is absolute.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and certainly right now you would have to agree that the Democrats oppose that more than any other political
There
party.
is definitely a trend of censorship, which
Yeah.
is concerning. But
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about free speech that makes me so sad about that is that was such a leftist ideal, a leftist value. The fact that you hear other people's points, because it's just derived directly from like Enlightenment liberal thought. You know?
Well, there was a girl here who got really mad at me earlier who brought up like Huck Finn, that it used the N-word in the book. And she goes, and we shouldn't have, I think she was implying we shouldn't have it in audiobooks. And I said, what? She goes, well, if you were reading it in a class, would you say the N-word? I said, well, yeah. If I was reading in the class and I'm reading a book, if I'm reading a book and we're all in the class
man.
reading it. And she was wildly offended. You know, Richard Pryor, his album,
Richard Pryor's really interesting comic.
He's the best comic ever.
He's definitely up there.
He's definitely up there. And he
I
said, I
love
don't want
him.
white people to call it one crazy N-word. He's like, why
love
would you
him.
change the name of my album?
I love him. I love Chappelle. I love.
Yeah.
I don't. You know Andrew Schultz?
I do know, I don't know him personally, but
That's interesting that he brings that up because later in his life, Pryor hardcore changed his stance on the N-word after he took a trip to some African country he went to, and when he came back, he was anti everybody saying the N-word, even black people. Somebody can go look up the quotes that they want, but
look, do you think George Carlin would be fine with this? Right now, if I say this word, it's removed from any and all social media. We'll bleep it. George Carlin would say, oh, if you say that word,
wait,
they're
what? Did he didn't just say the N-word, did he?
remove you from everything? That's bull.
I mean, he would say that's bullshit. I think it's disrespectful to people to say it. I don't think.
I was referring to a car. All right, but I do have to, listen, I appreciate it, brother. George, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think we disagree a lot, but I think
We did.
this is exactly what. Time for you to sound off in the comments below.
Comments, guys. Remember to hit that like and subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell so that my videos show up right in your feed.
Racism, sexism, homo.